Hello and welcome to the Pregnancy Playbook podcast. I'm Amy Strongman, your host, and I'm extremely passionate about this stage of womanhood. So whether you're just thinking about starting a family or in the early realms of motherhood, this is a space for you. We'll be talking all things preconception, pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Each episode, I'll be sitting down with some amazing guests, sharing insights, experiences, expertise, and much, much more. So whether we are debusting some myths or learning something new, this space is for you. We really want this stage of womanhood to feel like a little less overwhelming and a lot more magical. This is maternal alchemy, and this transformational stage of womanhood, it's at its best. So let's put the kettle on, grab a cuppa, and let's join us, and let's get started. Hello, welcome. And today I am joined by the wonderful Megan Rossiter, who is the founder of Birth.Ed and the Birth.Ed method, and has her wonderful podcast, the Birth.Ed podcast. And we are both so passionate about talking about childbirth and about preparing for childbirth. And what's amazing about Megan is she too works holistically and looks at the whole concept of birth preparation, and I'm delighted that she is sharing her bank holiday with me here today. So welcome, Megan. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
And we're going to start, I think, at the heart, because like me, you have found a real, I guess, importance of what's lacking and perhaps what isn't available to all about birth education. And we feel that it is really important that women have access to what is important at birth. So I just wanted to start, well, I'm sure you can share your story, but where did it start for you? What made you kind of take this leap and create your own birthing preparation course?
So I suppose it was a reasonably long time in the making. My kind of introduction to the world of birth started when, 2014? No, is that? I can't even remember how many years ago, when I started my midwifery training. And in my second year, I fell pregnant with my now eldest son. And after he was born, various factors, including childcare funding and money, meant that I didn't go back to finish off my third year. And in that period of time, trained to teach hypnobirthing, which I did for the kind of following years after that. But over that time, found that hypnobirthing as a kind of method of preparation was problematic in a lot of ways, and in some of the ways that it was being taught, I felt like it was missing the mark or letting women down, and in some cases, not particularly the way that I taught it, but in the kind of way of preparing for birth as a whole, I found for some women it was kind of contributing to feelings of trauma, and I wanted to be able to kind of distance myself from that. And I felt like there were aspects of preparation that were really important that were still missing within that kind of framework of birth preparation. So that led me to create my own framework of preparation, which became the Birth.Ed method over the kind of last few years, which I suppose focuses on kind of 4 pillars of preparation. So looking at the kind of the choices that you have, the way that you communicate, the mind and the body. So really understanding what's happening in your body from a kind of biological perspective, what's happening in your mind from a kind of mental perspective, what choices you've got, and then how to communicate those choices with the people that are looking after you. And to me, birth preparation is ultimately pointless unless we have all 4 of those pillars kind of prepared for, because one without the other is going to leave us kind of floundering, I think, in a system that isn't always readily going to support what we really need when it comes to giving birth.
And it is a game changer when you have like a toolkit, and to be able to voice that and ask questions and feel confident, which is what we need to feel at this wonderful time of creation. We actually, I don't know, sometimes it's arguably, it shouldn't be our responsibility, but at this moment in time, it really is us, and it is the woman that is having the baby and needs to be supportive in all aspects. So actually taking control of that can be really, really powerful. And I think I'm so excited that you're here today, is that we have this shared belief that it is us that takes the kind of the power. It is us to step into our sovereignty. It's the woman to really begin to cultivate this sense of self-trust that she can birth her way but there's nothing out there until obviously you now create your own and it's available. So we kind of have to, I guess, share with women like what they deserve to know and know their capabilities. And how do you feel that birth education is a tool then for change? How do you think it impacts? Yes, you talk about the pillars, but how does that change for women?
So I think what you mentioned around kind of self-trust, I think that's the bit that is missing from most antenatal education, is we can like lay out your options on the table and you can know what you're allowed to ask for or what is available to you. But if you don't trust yourself to take responsibility for that decision,
such a big word,
then it's impossible to actually hold power in your birth, because taking responsibility is quite frightening. Like, it's quite scary, because the responsibility of growing this baby and giving birth to it safely,
and it never stops, does it? Like the responsibility, my mum used to say it comes in waves, and I'd be like, oh yeah, and then it's like, oh yes.
And I think that's a really helpful thing for women to know in pregnancy, is that we talk about kind of advocacy during pregnancy, during labour and birth and stuff. And I think sometimes we can think that advocacy, it's like that's the point, that it's important. And actually that is just the very beginning of a lifetime of advocating for your child. And I think that understanding that what the choices that you are making and the reason that they feel important to you is obviously in part because you want certain things from your experience of birth. But sometimes that can make women feel selfish, or like, oh, why do I want this? Ultimately, the most important thing to me is that my baby arrives safely and healthy, of course. But sometimes I think flipping that narrative and going, actually, it doesn't have to be about you. It is a choice that you are making for your baby. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly those feelings of feeling a bit selfish or a bit needy or a bit inconvenient to the system, or whatever it is that you're asking for is a bit too demanding. That can be wiped away when you go, yeah, but it's not for me. It's for my baby.
Okay, so interesting. I'm going to say something now, because do you think then that's actually the intuition speaking, in my experience, like that feeling of I would like this, but is kind of like a quiet whisper, is that whole essence of you, of what you believe and deem to feel right for you at that moment. And it's so, for my experience, we're just so disconnected. We're just cruising through life at a pace that is unsustainable. And then we're sort of growing a baby. Then we're still working usually when we're pregnant. Then we have the baby. And it's all happening so quickly, we forget that actually we have these deep inner feelings and knowing. I mean, what is it? 75% of women actually want this beautiful natural birth and vaginal birth or whatever it might be. That's an actual state that we all feel. And then it's sort of things happen and unravel and reveal. And if we don't have the confidence, it's hard to then sort of speak that truth of what we actually want.
Yeah, I think that, we have had a lifetime of learning to completely ignore our bodies. Like, how many people, when you're at work, you can't go for a wee at this moment in time. Like, just think to yourself now, if you're watching or listening to this, like, what are the kind of very basic physical needs of your body? Like, think how frequently you think you're hungry and you realise actually you're thirsty, or that you need to go for a wee and you can't go for a wee, or that you're tired and you're scrolling on your phone for 2 hours. Like, our body is like screaming at us these like very, very basic physical needs all day, every day. And we have had an entire lifetime. It starts at school when we can't go to the toilet until it's break time, or you can't eat when you're hungry because it's not snack time. Like, we have been kind of taught from this very early age to really, really stop listening to our bodies. When you're pregnant, first trimester, you're feeling sick, you're still going to work.
Don't tell anybody.
In no sense of the, like, if you were feeling sick or nauseous for any other reason, you would be like, I'm sorry, I'm feeling sick, I can't come to work. But because it's pregnancy related, we're like, no, it's fine, I have to get on with it because these other responsibilities are still so important. And so we shut these feelings down, and then it comes to birth and we wonder why we can't tune into that physical intuition. And I think if it isn't something that you've been practicing kind of before you've even got pregnant, pregnancy is like such an important time to start to tune into that and to start to the very first step is just recognizing, if you can't do it, I don't know, you're a teacher and you actually can't go for a wee at this point in time, at least acknowledge to yourself, notice, I need a wee, and tell yourself I need a wee. So then you have like acknowledged that it's a sensation that your body is telling you. And then if you have got the circumstances that allow it, really, really push yourselves to start acting upon the physical communication that your body is giving to you. Like, some things we will do instinctively. If you're sitting uncomfortably, you will move position without even thinking about it. And I think it's starting to recognize how frequently we ignore those things that can help almost kind of train ourselves back into leaning into that intuition. And that is going to help us so much in a kind of a labour.
Well, it's communication, right? The body, when you feel a sensation, your body is communicating with you, and it's your choice whether you listen. But you just touched upon the idea of kind of where you're at in your pregnancy. Now, if I look from my experience and I look at the women's bodies as like a season, and pregnancy as a season, and it would be the winter season where you're resourcing and you're kind of gathering all this information. And that's what women need to be, is resource. So the pregnancy is the perfect time to, not 6 months in, not like, I mean, any time is better if anyone's listening and watching, you know, it's never too late. But if you can start it earlier, you're going to just be gathering all the bits, and you'll lose things that perhaps don't resonate with you. And then you'll actually, you know, gain more and more and more. And I just wanted to know, because there's other kind of birth education out there, which is very rigid and starts very negatively. How do you think, or what do you think, I guess, are the biggest gaps in the birth education that's accessible at the moment? Like, traditionally, what's missing? I know you touched upon the kind of the self-trust, but any other big players that are not addressed?
I think the kind of biggest issue that I found with birth preparation is that it is very polarized. Like, it is either kind of provided by the maternity system or by people that work very rigidly within the guidelines and realms of the maternity system, and the information provided, whether intentionally or not, is shaping you and guiding you to fit into the demands of a very overstretched and medicalized system. And that kind of offers one side of the perspective, or it's kind of very polarizing in the other side, very rejecting of the maternity system and very kind of putting one type of birth on a pedestal, which can, I think, not necessarily set people up. If that is the kind of birth that they want, they're then thrown into a system that isn't going to support that in any way. And then we wonder why it didn't work. And sometimes we will blame that method of preparation because it was sort of sold as your body's supposed to work. And and it is supposed to work, but not within the realms of what we're putting it into. And I think there is a kind of missing bit in the middle. And that was what I wanted to kind of set up, was something that actually really helped women get to grips with their instinct and an understanding of what is going on in their body, and an ability to kind of tune into themselves and trust their instinct and their intuition and the feelings, the physical feelings that they're feeling, that helped them understand how that operates within a modern maternity system in a way that isn't what's the word for it, sort of really, really shutting down the people that are working in the system and setting up this kind of friction, this kind of us versus them. I personally don't think helps anybody. I think it puts us in a place where we feel at odds with the system, rather than like, actually, who are the people that are doing an incredible job working in the NHS or within maternity systems worldwide?
I think both of us have had that conversations with midwives directly as well, that, you know, actually they go in with this wonderful expectation of their job and their role and their experiences, and either they're not given the opportunity to see physiological birth, or they're sort of whisked away, and then it becomes a lot of birth they see are very medicalized. So really it's not, and then perhaps they get jaded, or they're in amongst the kind of stresses and trauma of medicalized and hospitalized births. And I'm, like you, I'm sure, a believer of positive birth, regardless of how and where you choose or where you end up. It's about how you feel. And I think education is the power, knowledge is the power to really change your own mindset and your perspective. But those women that are in the hospitals helping you when you're giving birth will be remembered forever, I'm sure, because they're people and they're humans and they want to do what's best for you at the time, even though at times it might not feel like it. So I am in agreement in that polarized aspect. But I mean, we can talk a little bit about the types of birth as well, because I think for anyone listening, they may not even be pregnant yet. You might just be, curious. But, at the moment, we always talk about C-sections, natural birth, or C-sections, home birth. And it, again, totally spectrumized kind of views of birth itself. Whereas we know, depending on the individual, it's so unique and your preferences will be different to everyone else. And no woman is the same and no birth environment is going to be the same. But if you know what you want, how much easier is that to try and at least make happen in some small way? So what one gentle thing do you think, someone who's just maybe stepping into the realm of thinking about babies, what would be your advice, where to start, how to go gently into preparing for birth?
I think it's definitely going to be a multifaceted approach, because I think really learning to tune into yourself, tune into your body, trust yourself, trust your instinct is absolutely vital, because your body's not going to lie to you in labor. And so whatever it is saying, even if we can't rationalize or make logic of it from the kind of outside, there will always be a reason for it. And so being able to tune into that instinct and respond to it, what I always say is you have one job in labor, and it is to listen and respond. That is it. That is your only job. You should not have to be advocating for yourself. You should not have to be making tons of decisions. You should not have to be putting yourself in positions that people are asking you to be, like, other than very emergency situations. That is your only job, is to feel and respond. And I think when we can boil it down to that, that's when we can make, things as simple as possible. What becomes difficult is that sounds like a very easy job. Like, that sounds like, okay, if that's all I've got to do, that's absolutely fine. What we kind of miss is that whilst we're trying to do that, we're trying to feel and respond, we are going to be, it's like being on this boat and it's sort of being rocked from side to side and you're being thrown all of these other things that try to disrupt you from that mission. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and this is, you mentioned it, it's unfortunate that this has to be your birth preparation, is you need to understand what do the realms of the system that we are trying to do that very simple job within, what does that look like and how do we navigate it? And I think that is massively lacking from most antenatal education, because our job ultimately is simple, but it's a very simple job in very complicated circumstances. And when you can begin to understand what those circumstances are, then you can begin to navigate the choices that you're making, the people that are around you, the places that you are, in order to make a decision that feels right for you in advance.
It is complex and it is sort of quite overwhelming, I think. If you were just to find out now, if I was just to find out again that I was pregnant for the first time, I don't know where I would go initially. When we all go to the doctor and be like, oh, I'm pregnant. But I know now some women would choose to have a wild pregnancy and therefore not tell anybody. But the knowledge of your basic physiology, of, even your genitalia and how babies come into the world it's so distant, isn't it, from our day-to-day life? And I think when women, it's about being curious. It's just about asking questions and actually really delving deep. But I think we've got this sort of shame. It's a shame that we have lots of sort of traumatic birth stories more and more that we're hearing about, because the positive ones are kind of quashed and we don't want to say about the really great ones. I mean, I would rave about my home birth till the cows come home, but maybe people don't want to hear that. That's sometimes how I think. But now I tell my clients, tell everyone, Tell anyone you can to find what it's like to birth at home, undisturbed, with your people that you love around you, with your support circle. Because when you know it exists and you know that's a possibility, that's for me like a little glimmer, a glimmer of hope that it is possible. I know you had a wonderful second home birth as well. It's like that's what drives me. That's literally why I started my business, is to kind of share that magic, because I was like, why has no one told me? Why has no one told me my body is capable of birthing a baby on the living room floor with 10 minutes before the midwife arrives? You know, it's that sort of, oh, hang on a second. Okay, well, if that happens, and I don't know about you, but I share a lot about, different cultures across the world about women, taking themselves to the river or labouring with dolphins in Hawaii. Because if you're like, what? That actually happens? You suddenly start to think differently and unlock a little piece of, oh, well, maybe I don't want that, what my friend had actually. What's my story? What's my pathway? And I was just wondering, have you got a story from a particular couple or family, or a woman who has really used birth education to switch maybe her second birth, or really seen that kind of empowered, sovereign birth experience?
Yeah, I mean, literally thousands.
Loads, I know. But, I knew you were going to say that.
But I think, for just going on something that you said a second ago, there's a bit of an irony, I always think, in that we don't actually need to know how birth works in order for birth to work.
Correct.
Like, you're a 3-year-old child. Nobody's ever given you a lesson on digestion, yet you can eat food and digest it perfectly adequately, and you do it every single day without question. And so we don't actually need that knowledge in order for it to happen. The reason why we do need that knowledge in the 21st century is because of the impact the mindset has on the progress and experience and feeling of birth and the choices that we make around it, because of the weird system that we try to do it in. Like, imagine if every time you needed a poo, somebody made you go to hospital and watch you and like timed you, and if you were taking too long, they were going to interfere. Yeah, so you've got that. And as you mentioned, we've got a kind of whole host of stories. Imagine if everybody told you every single day that they had constipation and diarrhea, and it was like that was the narrative about digestion. You'd be like, oh God, we're really bad at like eating and digesting food. What can I do to make sure that I can do that better? And so that is where we're coming from, which is why the conversation around hormones and the nervous system and the muscles and the biology, that is why we have those conversations. That is why that is important. If you had lived on women that do live on kind of desert islands, indigenous tribes, they are not going to antenatal education classes. They're just not.
But they're sharing stories and they've witnessed it. I think that's the difference. It's like they would have been witnessing, and our ancestors too would have been witnessing birth happen. We would have all been there. We would have been the midwives to our friends and our family.
Yeah.
But when do you ever see? How often? I mean, oh gosh, how grateful I am to have witnessed my friend give birth twice. I mean, honestly, the greatest privilege of my life so far, probably. But it's like, when do we see that? We barely see women breastfeeding. So to think that we can talk about birth in that same way, I know it's crazy.
And that is the bit I think that is missing, is that it's that passed down wisdom that goes from generation to generation, from woman to woman, about what, we get very, very hung up in the maternity system about what we call evidence-based care. So being able to make decisions based on scientific research that a doctor or sometimes a midwife has decided is something worthy of researching, and somebody else with money has decided it is worth something funding to research. And if we can understand that that is the kind of basis of evidence-based care, and that's not to say that that information isn't sometimes valuable, but it's to say that that isn't the only bit of information that is valuable. And you can learn so much from speaking to women about, and if you're talking to somebody about their birth story, we're not looking for like a timeline peppered with the number of centimetres dilated their cervix was. That is not helpful.
Can I just tell you about that? Because when I was at this recent birth, the midwives were filling in the forms after having been. And they're like, so when was she 10 centimetres dilated? They sort of laughed. They're like, well, we don't know, do we? Because we just watched a baby be born. The woman was definitely in labour. It was happening. And I just loved that, because I was like, that just proves exactly why. What does it matter? Some woman could go from 2 to 8. I'm sure I did in about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But what is all of this kind of tick
But
boxes?
when we tell our stories, that's what it will be. I got to the hospital, but I was only 2 centimetres dilated. Then I went home, but then I was 4. And it's like that that tends to be the kind of running theme.
Make it linear of something that is so...
Yeah.
I mean, I see it like a dance always, but, there's never a straight line to get to a baby being born.
And so asking women... But what did it feel like? Like, what was the sensation like? Where did you go in your house? What emotion did you feel? Which bit was really fucking difficult? And how did you manage? Did you panic? Who looked after you? Like, those questions.
Amazing. That is amazing. That is gold dust. Anyone watching or listening, that is gold dust. Yes. What did it feel like? Oh,
and it's hard. It's hard to have this because we're not used to telling our story like that. When we've had a baby, we go we nail down the medical milestones that happen. Then I had this pain relief. Then this midwife happened. Then I moved to this space. Then this offer happened. We don't say, oh, actually, I was feeling like it was really manageable at this point in time, or they were coming back to back, and I just couldn't cope, and my head was spiraling, and I was panicking and didn't know what to do.
Try to tap into my breathing. Yes.
Those are the bits that are helpful to somebody that is going to give birth. I don't care what moment the midwife walked in and what moment you moved to a labour. That doesn't shape the way that I would approach my birth.
Yeah.
But you saying, I was really panicked, and actually, I was speaking to a woman the other day, she was telling me her birth story, and she was saying the only thing that really helped me, I was sitting on the bathroom floor and my forehead was on the ceramic toilet seat, and it was just like really cold and distracting, and it offered me like so much comfort. And you're like, what? That does not appear in a birth story, but I can guarantee
that will help
somebody else. And those are the little bits, the little kind of tidbits of information that just get awash when we're presented with, well, what pain relief would you like? Do you want this intervention? And it's like a format of decisions that we have to make rather than an emotional and feeling experience that we're going to live through.
Well, let's change it now. For anyone listening and watching, don't ever describe your birth experience anymore with numbers and figures and people coming in and out. Let's just think about how it feels and share that message to everyone. I think that is amazing. I think that's the best way to look at it.
And those conversations can go, that doesn't have to be, we talk a lot about making sure that you're hearing stories that are those good ones, because our subconscious mind is not tuned into the fact that these exist. But that doesn't mean you can't hear stories of women who were like, actually, my birth was really difficult or went a way that I really wasn't expecting, because there is such wisdom there to be like, okay, so what happened? Like, what decisions did you make? Who was talking to you and what were they saying to you? And how did that affect the decisions that you were making?
And
because then we can,
and still feeling too, because I remember having a debrief with one lady, and I've never forgot it, and now I pass it on to everyone. Her biggest thing was that she couldn't piece together the time she'd been from theatre to coming out and being with her baby. And so now I just tell every birth partner, just take photos. Just take photos of every bit along the way that she might not be able to remember. And I would never have known that had she not been able to reflect back and say, I've got this missing puzzle piece. I can't quite figure out where I was. And I think things like that just help other women to then think, okay, well, actually, I'll tell my birth partner that if that does happen, please can you do X, Y, and Z? And that might make her healing journey better. And
I've got another tidbit that was another couple that I worked with who were in labour, going in to have a baby, and they had. Then this is one that I always share with everybody because I think it's such a nice, really simple thing that you can do. And they had been planning to give birth in the hospital or birth centre, can't remember which, they were in the same building, and had this kind of slightly stressful car journey, and it was that's not an enjoyable part of labour. And they got to hospital, I think it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was it was dark outside, and it was a clear night, and there were stars. And before they, get out the car, rush in, go to triage, get offered a vaginal examination, all of this stuff that's going to happen, they said they just stopped and they sat on this bench outside the hospital and they looked at the stars and they were like, this is the last time we're going to be like outside as like a two. And the next time we're under this sky, there's going to be 3 of us and we're going to be a family. And you're like, oh my God. And like that.
Oh, that's got me.
Just taking a moment to acknowledge the massiveness and the kind of, the experience of what you're going through. And we sometimes think that it's got to be this rushed process. We've got to get here. And sometimes it will be. I have supported women who have given birth in the lift on the way up to the hospital, so she probably wasn't going to stop out to gaze at the stars. But if there are those opportunities, it's allowing the feeling of what you're experiencing to hold value and to be important, more important than making sure you're in the next hospital room and it's actually giving yourself that space and taking the opportunity. You can do that at any point in birth. You can just say, look, can everybody just go out of the room for a minute and just have a kiss and a cuddle and be like, oh my God, we're going to meet our baby.
But it is like that. It's so, I mean, for me, it is spiritual. There is an element, you talk about the pillars, but for me, there is that spiritual element of something that is bigger than us. This is nature at its kind of pinnacle of something we cannot really explain. We still don't know when a baby actually is exactly going to be born, or we don't know exactly when a baby is conceived. And so this is this sense of mystery and magic that is still definitely beholden amongst us. And if we can take those minutes, I mean, gosh, that is amazing.
Isn't it?
Just so special. And even like you say, tapping out in labour, just kind of and breathe and take a breath and together then, and acknowledge this huge thing.
Yeah. And, and that doesn't even just have to be in a kind of physiological birth. There was a family I supported when I was a student who were a Muslim family, and it was really important to them that the very first thing their baby heard was a prayer spoken by the baby's father. And it was, and because it was a religious request, it was respected without question in theatre. And she had this cesarean birth. And there was like this beautiful, poignant moment where the whole room was quiet and the father was sort of speaking to his baby. And you're like, God, why is this not just the routine normal, without it being this kind of specific thing that they have had to ask for? Why is that not? And it doesn't have to be a religious. If you're watching and you're not religious, you can say, actually, I really want that first moment to be that my baby hears my voice, my baby hears their other parent's voice, whatever it is. Giving yourself moments to kind of create those really sacred, special moments. And I think probably even more so in a labour that, if you're having your baby at home and you've gone into labour at home and you haven't left your house, those moments just sort of arrive as par for the
throughout
course.
The whole journey. Yeah.
If you're having a more medicalised birth, it can be really important and can be really valuable to kind of make sure that they're happening and giving yourself opportunity for those things to happen. Even if it was a very difficult birth, kind of postnatally going, right, we're going to have a moment where we really just reflect on everything that we've just been to and welcome this baby into the world. Those can be really special moments sort of like in our experience.
Rituals of just acknowledgement, and I think really understanding that you can make it bespoke to you. I think there's this sense of we're going with the flow. Well, whose flow? Whose flow are you going with? Where are you heading? And actually to know that you can make these little decisions and add little things in. And I love that story about that family because it is so poignant that anybody could do that. I mean, yes, you have to stamp your foot down maybe, but you at least have it written, at least consider it and actually have an awareness of what actually do I want? Again, tapping into that intuition. What is it that we want for this experience together and how can we make it just for us? And we talk about that idea of dream birth, don't we? Like everyone's like, I want a dream, what is your dream birth? And everyone goes, oh no, it's like, no, the dream birth is your birth. What you want, you can at least put on paper and at least start to try and manifest it in, or at least kind of call some elements that you have control over. And I think that is really, really important. What one thing do you often hear that makes you think, if only people knew the truth about this, if only people knew that this is possible, a bit like that, but how, have you got anything else?
Only one.
Well, reel them off.
Okay, I have the biggest one is when women think they have to have an induction of labour. Oh my God,
I knew this was going to come.
And
Get ready.
This is, I should have written the stats down. 33% of women nationally last year had an induction of labour, and 20-something% had a planned cesarean birth, which left less than 50% of women going into spontaneous labour, which is fucking insane. Like, of course, planned cesarean birth and induction of labour have a really, really valid place in a safe modern maternity system. If less than 50% of women could safely go into spontaneous labour, the human race would have ceased to exist a long time ago. And what is changing is the parameters for which a woman can be considered, to use the words of the system, low risk, are getting narrower and narrower and narrower. The length of pregnancy that is considered to be normal is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And the guidance around when we should intervene is getting earlier and earlier and earlier. And this isn't necessarily based on high quality, good evidence, yet it is often presented as if it is. And that's the bit that is, in my opinion, wrong, is that if a woman is going into having an induction of labour, and I think it's often helpful to point out, is that I have had an induction of labour that I entered informed and willingly and had a really good experience. So this is not to say that induction of labour is always bad, unnecessary, traumatic. It can be those things. But when women are going in, and number one, they don't actually know what induction of labour involves. So they do not realise what all of the risks of an induction of labour are, or what all of the potential outcomes of an induction of labour are, or what the process is likely to feel like, how long it is going to take, what it is actually going to involve. Then they are not entering anything with any form of informed consent, which, by the way, is illegal. So that's our kind of first issue. The second issue is when they have been forced to make that decision based on either completely incorrect or slightly manipulated research to make them more likely to accept it rather than not. That might be women that are told they've got very well-controlled gestational diabetes that they've controlled through changes to their diet, and they're told that they need to have an induction at 40 weeks. Or they are, 40 years old, healthy, and they're told that they cannot go past their due date. And they're not given the statistical information or the research around what that decision is. And there are even situations where women are told they have to have an induction and no research at all exists to say whether induction of labour actually improves the outcomes of the complexity that they may have.
And it's so early. I always just think it's so early, 39 weeks. I'm just thinking, what is it in France, 42? We don't know when babies are ready. We just don't know.
And there are complexities of pregnancy where risks do increase, and there are gestations of pregnancy. The further in pregnancy you get, the risk of stillbirth does increase, and it's not to deny those facts. But when women are being told, if you don't have an induction, your baby might die inside of you, well, obviously you're going to have it. Nobody is going to say no. And so when women are kind of manipulated into making that decision, then it is an issue. And what I personally don't understand is that if women had all of the information, they may still go on to have an induction, but they're much more likely to have a positive experience of it because they knew what they were getting themselves in for. If they go 5 days down the line, your cervix still hasn't dilated, it's time for a cesarean, and they're like, what? Nobody told me that could be a potential outcome. That is so unfair. But if they knew the whole time that actually this process might not work, it might make my baby very unhappy, it might be that I can't cope with it, and actually that a cesarean might be an option, how different is that going into that birth experience? And so that is the kind of, I think the biggest issue is that women don't realise they can say no. They don't realise that they can plan for a multitude of alternatives. The alternative is not just saying no. If you think your baby should be born soon, you could plan for a cesarean birth in the next few days. You could say, actually, I don't want an induction now, but give it a week. Maybe I might change my mind. I actually feel happy with X, Y, and Z stages of the induction, but I don't feel happy with this stage of the induction. And it is not presented like that at all.
That you have a choice,
And I think that is an absolute failure of our maternity system that is letting down, I would say, almost the majority of women that are giving birth.
It's so sad, isn't it? It's such a high percentage of women, having that being offered to them so regularly. And I find it more on my own experience of first-time mums who really put a lot of trust into the care professionals and then tap out of their own how they're feeling, or present an induction but they've been feeling fine. So maybe there is a worry, maybe there is a concern because so-and-so's told me. And I think, it's just that one, it's a once in a lifetime experience. And this is what I really sort of find hard, is that we think it's like just the birth. Let's do the birth prep, we'll focus on the birth, and then we're done. But it is so much more than that, and it goes right through to postpartum and your healing stages, the 4th trimester, but it lasts a lifetime. We're never going to forget having a baby. So if you can think about a memory that lasts that long, really, you've got to be thinking, well, how do I want it to be for me, and how do I want to feel about it? It's how do I feel going in? How do I feel coming out? It will impact your mothering. It will impact your relationships. It will impact your relationship with your baby and your bonding. It's not just this, get the baby out of my body.
Yeah,
It's
I think
so much bigger.
the maternity system has a real insistence on separating conception, pregnancy, birth, feeding, postpartum, parenting, as though they are individual experiences that we just happen to experience simultaneously, or kind of one after the other. But they're like this interconnected web where the way you experience one is going to directly influence and impact the other. And the way that we experience birth will impact us physically and emotionally, and our babies physically and emotionally, forever.
Yes.
And this is what it's heartbreaking that we, when the medical system looks into research around pregnancy, 99% of the time, it will look at very short-term outcomes. It will look at, is the baby alive? Is the mother alive? What are the baby's APGAR scores? So that's the kind of looking at how well the baby is after birth in the first 1, 5, and 10 minutes after they're born. And very occasionally, it might look at the kind of first few months, maybe year after the birth. There is virtually no research that is looking into the outcomes of birth on women, on babies throughout their lifetime.
As a mother-baby relationship, as a kind of communion.
Yeah, but also the kind of microbiome of the baby, how it affects them when they're 60 years old. Those things, we just don't have the data. We don't have the research. But we know there's been loads of research now into what we call the first 1,000 days. So looking at the moment from conception up until the baby's kind of 3rd birthday. And a lot of it is focused on nutrition because it's a kind of worldwide initiative, and it's looking at the kind of disparities between parts of the world where actually women and children are not receiving even the very basic kind of adequate access to safe water and nutrition. But it is saying that the way that their health is impacted through pregnancy, birth, infant feeding, the first 3 years, what they're kind of exposed to and the diet they're exposed to, all of that impacts your life more profoundly than any other stage of your entire life. And that's wild that we then don't value birth as the most significant experience in a human's life.
Without a doubt.
And so
it's our first blueprint. It's our first rite of passage.
Yeah.
Birth is our first rite of passage. It impacts, especially in women, our menarche, our first bleed. It impacts how we birth. It has so much behind it.
And that is, we're going to carry that experience with us forever. But when we talk about that, if you're watching this now, that's too, I can't hold that responsibility. It is too big. I cannot be responsible for the way that baby is going to experience. I just can't hold it. And even now, I have 2 children. Some of the things that happen, and I'm like, it's too much. I can't hold that whole responsibility. And you shouldn't have to. You're obviously the person giving birth.
Yes, but it's not just you. This
exactly.
is the thing. Once you've carried them and nurtured them, and then they enter Earth's side, then it becomes a community. And that's what we've forgotten too, because we're not in that village. We're not in that space where we can just pop down the road and parent together. And my friends and I were always like, God, it's so much easier when we're all together and the kids are playing.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier en masse. But we, in those early stages, we just don't have it. Yeah. Who's bringing your food to your door? I mean, thank goodness there's postnatal doulas, because those are the women that love and care and tend to you, the mothers that will mother you in that early stage of mothering. Yeah. because it is easier when you're doing it together, and it's hard when you're on your own.
I think, yeah. And I want to point out that, humans are also resilient. We have survived for thousands of years, and we can cope with quite severe trauma and stress and still thrive as humans. So it's not, whilst, the responsibility shouldn't feel so overwhelming, but it should put value on, pressure on the government, on the systems of like, this is so important. It doesn't get the support that it needs to get, and it doesn't get the respect that it needs to get.
Value, yeah. That's motherhood as a whole. We can do a whole other podcast on that. And that would be a great one to do. So yes, it's so true. And I would love to just kind of, gosh, we've touched on so much. So it's so juicy to have you here and really delve into, how it's set up for women. I would love, because we ask every guest to share one gift. And I know it's hard for one, but one gift to maybe anyone on their pregnancy pathway, or even a new mum, if you have some wonderful wisdom, maybe that you've been given or that you'd like to share, to give to anyone listening or watching.
I think it is going to be that bit about self-trust. So the first time that I heard this was when I was, I think, a first-year student midwife, and I feel really privileged that the first 5 births that I saw were on a birth centre. So they were water births or kind of very straightforward birth experiences. And I was working with an incredible mentor, and she said to me there was a woman whose baby was in a back-to-back position, and she was kind of doing this sort of early pushing urges, not like bearing down or like the baby's coming out, that kind of like nudgy pushing sensation. And the midwife that I was working with said, just watch what she's doing. Don't do anything, don't go near her, don't say anything, just watch. And so we were in the background and watched what was going on. And then the nudging pushing stopped. And about 20 minutes later, 3 or 4 like enormous bearing down pushes, and her baby was born. And she said to me afterwards, when we were talking about it, she said, see, she needed to rotate her baby. Just remember, Megan, your body will not lie to you in labour. And I was like, oh, okay, wow. Like, yeah, because that's what her body was telling her to do. She didn't ask, oh, it feels like I'm doing this. Is that okay? The midwife never said, it looks like you're pushing. Does it feel like you need to? There was nothing mentioned. She was just allowed to feel and respond to what she was saying, her body was telling her. And I think it takes great self-trust to be able to do that. So I think giving women the kind of time and space to develop that self-trust will serve them through pregnancy and the decisions that they're making. It will serve them through labour or birth, however they're giving birth to their baby. And being able to trust yourself so deeply that you can shut out all the fucking noise that comes. If you think it's noisy in pregnancy, oh my God, wait until your baby has been born. There are opinions about everything. Your baby's sleep, the way your baby eats, the way that you wean them, the kind of childcare that you use, whether or not you go back to work, every single thing. And being able to shake the noise of what everybody else is doing, even if it looks like the majority of people are doing something, if your body is saying, I don't think that's right for my individual unique baby, because they are not little robot clones of each other as they are presented to be, believing yourself and your relationship with your baby in your unique family setup is going to serve you so much better than any like manual book or online program or, whatever, like a routine or regime that you should be following. Tuning into that is the one thing that will change your pregnancy, birth and motherhood experience.
Well, thank you, Megan. I mean, that is wise words, and it's so true. And I think it grows and grows depending on, the more babies you have, you sort of really bat away anyone else's kind of thoughts. So thank you so much for joining me here today. Honestly, it's been amazing to have you and to delve really very quickly and deep into birth preparation. So thank you, and thanks so much for listening, and all of you who've tuned in. It's really lovely to have you here, and I really hope this has been the start of a little quest to maybe find out a little bit more about birth education and why it's so important to really take ownership of how you want to birth and bring your baby into the world. So until next time, thank you so much. And remember, you'll know everything you need to know by heart, and everything else is within.